Welcome to the Unity BootCamp lesson on incrementing user statistics. In this lesson, we're going to modify the example game to increment the 3 user statistics that we defined in a previous lesson. To do that, we'll need to use the increment user stats request. This request requires one parameter, a string that contains the statistic names and how much the values have been incremented by. Click the JSON response to familiarize yourself with the data that the request will return. Notice that an updated list of statistics is returned. We'll go over the significance of this in a few moments. Scroll up and notice that there are complex operations that are supported with this request. Click the Statistics Grammar section link. These complex operations can be applied to both global statistics and user statistics. We won't be using any of these operations in this lesson, but it's good to know that they exist. Once you're done scrolling through the complex statistic operations, head over to the brainCloud portal. We're going to try out the increment user stats request in the Cloud Code API Explorer. Authenticate. Then from the service drop-down list, select Player Statistics. From the operation drop-down list, select Read All User Stats. Click Execute to run the request. In the response, copy the statistic names and their values. From the operations drop-down list, select Increment User Stats. In the parameter section, paste in the statistics that we just copied and format them with some data. Click Execute to run the request. Notice in the response the statistics have been updated and their current values have been returned. In your game or app, it's important to update the list of statistics with the values that the response returns. You'll see an example of this shortly when we implement the increment user stats request in the example game. Let's increment the user stats one more time. In the parameters section, format the statistic values, then click Execute. Notice in the response that the statistic values that we just incremented were added to the existing values. Open Visual Studio and navigate to the network class. Declare a pair of public callback delegates for incrementing user statistics. Notice that the completed callback delegate has a parameter of type reference to a list of statistic objects. This is the same type of parameter as the completed callback method from the previous lesson. You may be wondering why we need to return a vector of statistic objects when we increment the statistics. The reason is that brainCloud has the de facto master list and our client does not. When a statistic gets incremented, it is possible that the user is logged in from 2 separate devices and playing the game. brainCloud can keep track of the statistic increments from both devices. That's why we update the client's list of statistics on an increment request. The same logic would apply to all global statistics as well. Scroll down. Declare a public method called increment user statistics. The first parameter is a dictionary of string and objects that represents the statistic data that we are incrementing. The next 2 parameters are the completed and failed callback delegates. In the body of the method, check to see if the user is authenticated. If the user is not authenticated, log a meaningful error message, and if set, invoke the failed callback delegate. If the user is authenticated, declare the success callback lambda. In the body of the lambda, log the response data, then create a JSON object from the response data and begin to parse it. Declare a list of statistic objects called statistics list. Get the statistics array and loop through each element and get the name and value. Use the name to determine the description. Create a new statistic object and add it to the statistics list. If set, invoke the completed callback delegate, passing in a reference to the statistics list. Next, declare the failed callback lambda. In the body of the lambda, log an error message along with the status message. Then if set, invoke the failed callback delegate. Finally, invoke the brainCloud's Player Statistics Services increment user stats request, passing in the data dictionary and the success and failure callback lambdas as the arguments. Save the file. Navigate to the Statistics Manager script. Declare a public method called getIncrementsDictionary. This method returns a dictionary of string and objects. In the body, safety check that the statistics list member variable is not null. Then declare a dictionary of string and objects called data. Loop through all the statistic objects and add the name and increments to the data dictionary. Once you're done looping through all the statistic objects, return the data dictionary. In the event that the statistics list member variable is null, this method will return null instead. Save the file. Navigate to the game script. Scroll down to the bottom. Declare a private method called onIncrementsUserStatisticsCompleted. This method will be invoked on a successful brainCloud increment user stats request. In the body, invoke the Statistics Manager's setStatistics method, passing in the statistics parameter as the argument. Scroll up and find the onShipHasExploded method. In this method, we're going to get the games played statistic object from the Statistics Manager and apply an increment to it. Then we'll invoke the Statistics Manager's getIncrementsDictionary method and get the increments dictionary. Then we'll invoke the network manager's increment user statistics method, passing in the increments dictionary and the onIncrements user statistics completed method as the arguments. We are only going to call the increment user statistics method when the game ends. It doesn't make sense to keep sending increment data to brainCloud every time a statistic increments, but rather when our game ends, which in this case is when the ship explodes. There's one more place in our code where the game can end, and that's when the boss is defeated in horde mode. In the onBossHasExploded method located below. In this method, we're going to get the game's played statistic object from the statistics manager and apply an increment to it. Then we'll invoke the statistics manager's getIncrementsDictionary method and get the increments dictionary. Then we'll invoke the network manager's increment user statistics method, passing in the increments dictionary and the onIncrements user statistics completed method as the arguments. Now all that's left is to increment the appropriate statistic objects when an asteroid or an enemy is destroyed. Save the file. Navigate to the ship script. Scroll down and find the onTriggerEnter2D method. In the highlighted if statement, get the asteroids destroyed statistic object from the statistics manager and apply an increment to it. Notice that we are not sending the increments to the brainCloud server. We only send the statistic increments when the game is over. Then in the highlighted if statement below, get the enemies killed statistic object from the statistics manager and apply an increment to it. Save the file. Navigate to the enemy script. Scroll down and find the onTriggerEnter2D method. In the highlighted if statement, get the enemies killed statistic object from the statistics manager and apply an increment to it. Save the file. Navigate to the asteroid script. Scroll down and find the onTriggerEnter2D method. Check to see if the color of the laser colliding with the asteroid is blue. The game is designed so that only the player can shoot blue lasers. Then we'll get the asteroids destroyed statistic object from the statistics manager and apply an increment to it. Save the file. Navigate to the boss script. Scroll down and find the onTriggerEnter2D method. In the highlighted if statement, get the enemies killed statistic object from the statistics manager and apply an increment to it. Save the file. Head back into Unity. If you need to perform a manual refresh, do so now. Run the game. Before we play, open the statistics dialog and let's check the current statistics values. This user hasn't played yet, so the values are all at 0. Let's change that. Close the dialog and from the main menu, click Endless Mode. To save time, video playback has been sped up. The player has exploded and the game is over. The user statistic increments are then sent to brainCloud. brainCloud then sends back the updated user statistic values. Checking the brainCloud statistics dialog, you'll notice that the statistics have been updated. Close the dialog and then select New Game. Again, to save time, the video playback has been sped up. The player has exploded and the game is over. Let's check out the statistics dialog. You'll notice that the user statistics that we just submitted were added to the existing user statistic values that were already on the brainCloud server. How to set up achievements is the next lesson in the Unity BootCamp.